What's happening, everyone? I'm James Lynch. This is Early Look. On today's episode, I'm going to be previewing the light heavyweight fight as part of the co-main event for UFC Charlotte between Anthony Smith and Johnny Walker. Really excited to get into this one. Some weird stuff going on where this was the main event and now it's not. I still don't know the reason for that. A little bit wacky over there, but yeah, really good fight here in the light heavyweight division. A lot of implications going into this one. And yeah, like I mentioned there, 3-round fight. Quick tail of the tape here. Lionheart, 36-17. Johnny Walker, 20-7. 34 years old for Smith. 31 years old for Walker. 6'4" to 6'6". 76-inch reach to 82. So Johnny Walker, like he usually is in his fights, going to be the bigger guy in this one. I did have a chance to speak to Johnny before this fight. You guys can check that out on my UFC interviews playlist. Trying to get something with Anthony Smith. We'll see if it ends up happening. But let's start with Lionheart first, the former UFC light heavyweight title challenger, shall we? So he's the number 5 ranked light heavyweight. He's a BJJ black belt. He's got performance of the night 6 times against Elvis Mutapich, Mauricio Shogun Hua, Volkan Ozdemir, Alexander Gustafsson, Devin Clark, and Ryan Spann. He's got fight of the night 1 time against Thiago Santos. He's got the 6th highest finish win percentage in UFC history with 10 finishes, 11 wins, 90.9%. He is the former CFFC middleweight champion and also the former Victory FC middleweight champion. Smith made his debut way back in October of 2007. Made his pro debut in February of 2008. Made his UFC debut in June of 2013. People forget he had one stint with the UFC here, back on UFC on Fuel 10, back in June of 2013, and then was cut, and then had all these fights, and then worked his way back to the UFC. So I think people kind of forget that. And what weight class was that in? Yeah, that was middleweight. Okay, well there you go. And also fought in Strikeforce. People forget that too, as far as some of his older fights. Smith is 11-7 in the UFC. He's got 10 stoppage wins. Some wins include Rashad Evans. That was a good win. Mauricio Shogun Hua. Volkan Ozdemir was ranked at the time. Alexander Gustafsson was ranked at the time. Jimmy Crute, who I believe was ranked at the time. Ryan Spann. And yeah, those are pretty much all the good wins. Some of his losses include Thiago Santos at middleweight, John Jones, Glover Teixeira, Alexander Rakic, and most recently Magomed Ankalaev, although a bit of a weird fight there. He hasn't really had many layoffs. The layoff going into this fight, because obviously he had an injury in that fight with Ankalaev. So fighting in July, fighting here in May, there's a 287-day layoff. And outside of that, Smith really hasn't had any injuries. He's been very active, one of the more active fighters on the roster. He's only had one close fight here, and that was the fight against, which one is it? UFC Fight Night 83. Which was that? I find the fight. Was that his return? Oh, unless it was this fight here. Hold on. UFC on Fuel 10. Trying to find the fight he had. Anyways, he's only had one close fight. The John Jones fight, while it did go the distance, everyone sort of felt that John won the matchup. I'm trying to find this fight here. What am I looking for here? Elvis Mutapich. Oh, this is the one. Leonardo. That's the fight. So he ended up winning that fight by decision, beating Leonardo Guermes. I don't know how you say that guy's name, but check this out. 9 media members scoring the fight for Smith, 6 scoring it a draw, and 2 calling it for his opponent. So that might have been one that wasn't a win for Smith there, which is interesting. Other than that, Anthony Smith, I know he is back at Factory X training this camp, so that'll be good. Gets to work with guys like, Dustin Jacoby and Cody Brundage and a lot of the bigger guys over there. Some stats for Anthony Smith right now. He's got a significant striking accuracy of 47%. He's got 42% striking defense. He does get hit a bit. Average takedowns landed per 15 minutes is 0.44. Doesn't go for takedowns very often. His takedown accuracy is 27%. Again, doesn't go for takedowns very often. His takedown defense is 48%. And the average submission attempts per 15 minutes is 0.7. So, yeah, I mean, he has some submission wins like the Ryan Spann fight, but typically we're looking at knockout wins for him there. 51% of his wins are by knockout. So that's pretty much everything you need to know about Anthony Smith. Do got to point out the obvious, and people like to sort of, have a different narrative about it, but he was injured in that Ankalaev fight. Like, Ankalaev won, he got the stoppage win. Smith wasn't going to survive just because of the injury. Like, people acting like that was a legit TKO win, ground and pound. You could see that Smith was injured, early in that second round, kind of like what happened with Rakic a little bit in his fight with Jan Blachowicz. So again, it's a win for Ankalaev, but if that injury doesn't happen, I'm sure Ankalaev still would have won. But yeah, I just think like people got to remember that it wasn't like a clean, like he got clipped and then finished that way. It was that he had an injury. So I want to point that out because I don't think you can take too much away from that performance, to be honest. He was obviously hurt in that fight. All right, let's get to Johnny Walker now. Really exciting fighter, one of the most exciting fighters in the UFC. You can see there. Johnny Walker, 20-7. He's got 16 knockouts, 3 submissions, and 1 decision. He's the number 12th ranked light heavyweight. He's 30 years old. He's 6'6" with an 82-inch reach. So he's 3 years younger than Anthony Smith. He's got a 2-inch height and a 6-inch reach advantage in this fight. He's a BJJ brown belt. He trains at SBG Ireland. He's got performance of the night 4 times against Khalil Roundtree, Justin Ledet, Misha Serkinov, and Ian Kutulaba. Never made an amateur debut, went straight to the pros in December of 2013, made his UFC debut in November of 2018, where right there, of course, he won in Contender Series. That's how he got in the UFC. He's got some notable wins here. Khalil Roundtree, Ryan Spann, similar opponent there, and most recently Paul Craig. He actually finished Craig in the first round. Very good win there. Some losses, though. We got to point those out. Corey Anderson got knocked out in that fight. Nikita Krylov out-wrestled him. Got a decision victory there. Thiago Santos finished him, or didn't finish him, but took him the distance. And Jamal Hill obviously finishing him in the first round, but Hill's knocking out a lot of guys. Not a bad loss to have, considering that Hill is the current 205-pound champion. So with all that said, you look at it there, Johnny Walker is 6-4 in the UFC. He's got 6 finishes. He's only gone the distance twice in 10 UFC fights. So again, probably not expecting this one to go to the scorecards, although it might because, again, Walker, doesn't typically go to the scorecards there. He's only had one major layoff in his career, and that was going from Ryan Spann to Thiago Santos. There was a 378-day layoff. He just fought in January, so no major layoff coming into this fight. Let's go through some of the stats as well with Johnny Walker here. Significant strikes landed per minute, 3.38. That's pretty good. Striking accuracy is at 60%. Striking defense is at 42%. Does get hit a bit. Average takedowns landed per 15 minutes, 0.41. No surprising there. He mainly keeps it standing. He's got 100% takedown accuracy. So I guess the takedowns he's attempted, he's done well. And his takedown defense is at 58%. So that'll be interesting because obviously, Smith has a pretty decent ground game in there as well. Maybe he wants to test that instead of, trying to keep it standing. We'll see what happens. All right, let's get to the odds here. Actually, we don't have odds for this fight, but what I can show you right now is how people are picking on Tapology. And you'll see it's pretty close. Actually, 53% of people picking Johnny Walker, which is interesting. I'm not sure how the odds will go on this one, to be honest. Smith's coming off a loss and a bit of a layoff. Walker's coming off a win. Possible Walker could be the favorite here, but we'll see. But I'll give you my pick here, and it's Anthony Smith. Now, here's why. That's why I brought up that Ankalaev fight. Smith does not get finished very often. Even Glover Teixeira, it took him 5 rounds to finish Anthony Smith. And granted, that's a fight that maybe they should have thrown in the towel, but this is a 3-round fight. So I just think that if Smith gets out of the first round, this is his fight. I just don't think this is going to be the fight where Johnny Walker goes out there and gets a first-round finish. Because again, we're talking about Anthony Smith, who's a very, very, very durable guy. Yes, he's been knocked out before at middleweight, but I think part of that was the weight cut, right? Like Thiago Santos knocked him out in the second round in their fight. But I just think that Anthony Smith, since he's gone to 205, his chin is held up a little bit better, right? In terms of that. Not to mention Smith's got a pretty solid ground game. He's well-rounded everywhere. And he's one of those fighters too that he doesn't his opponents don't look amazing against them unless except for the Rakic and Teixeira fights, and maybe Ankalaev you could throw in there too. But again, there's an injury there. Got to point that out. But you look like the John Jones fight, for example. Yeah, he lost that fight, but John didn't obliterate him or anything. There's only been, like I said, 2 fights that were kind of tough to watch. That was Glover and Rakic, and those are 2 of the top guys in the weight class. I'd probably pick Teixeira and Rakic over Johnny Walker right now. I would, because I think there's a lot of flaws with Johnny Walker. I think defensively he's not very good sometimes. Even the fight with Ian Kutulaba, that was a fight where Kutulaba actually had his back at first, and then somehow Walker was able to reverse it and get his own rear naked choke there. He's not going to be able to get away with that against Anthony Smith, who's got a much better ground game. Yeah, like I said, what it really comes down to for me is the durability of Smith and just his patience. He fought a wild guy already in Ryan Spann, and he went out there and he passed that test with flying colors, ended up going out there and submitting Ryan in the very first round. I could see something happening here. Again, Smith's fought far better opponents in his career too. The real question is here, does this go the distance or not? I could see it potentially going the distance in the sense that it's only 3 rounds, and Smith, I think, could just sort of grind Walker out, neutralize him a little bit and kind of win that way. But Smith does finish a lot, right? It's not typical of him going to the scorecards. And these are fighters that are, good fighters that he's finished. Now, granted, the Crute fight was an injury as well, so we can't really count that one either. But, finishing Spann, finishing Devin Clark in the first round, that's very interesting. And you notice those are by submission. I think the same thing's going to happen here. I think Smith's going to catch Walker in the second round, and then he's going to go in for the sub win, and he wins by submission. So I like Anthony Smith here. If he's anything close to an underdog, or if he is an underdog, I'm going to be betting him here. Again, I just think that Walker, he's beat 2 of the bottom level guys in the rankings, whereas Smith, he just lost to a guy who realistically should be fighting for a title next, right? So I think competition does play a big role in this. And yeah, I'm going to go Anthony Smith by second round submission to get it done over Johnny Walker. Bit of a shorter breakdown here today, but I really don't think there's much to talk about because I do think that Anthony Smith is the better overall fighter. We'll see. Age is catching up to him a little bit. Maybe this is the fight where Walker finishes him and we start talking about the decline of Anthony Smith, but I don't think so. I don't think it's going to be this fight. So let me know who you're picking in this fight. What do you think the odds are going to be? I guess by the time this comes out, maybe we will have the odds posted, but right now, no odds. I'm going Anthony Smith by second round submission to get it done. Who are you picking? Let me know. Let's have a friendly discussion about this. We don't need to insult and do all that different stuff. That would be awesome if you guys could do that. Also, let me know if there's any other fights you want me to preview in the coming weeks. Follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at Lynch on Sports and TikTok as well. Posting videos on there. And make sure you subscribe to this channel. Always appreciate the support. I'm James Lynch. I'll see you next time, and thanks so much for watching.